Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Santos Perez Ramirez wash processed Guatemala from Elm Coffee Roasters. And there's the bag right there. An Elm based out of Seattle, Washington, and this is their first time appearing on this channel. And for anybody that does not know, that right there is a map of Seattle, as I do consider Seattle to be my hometown. And this is a coffee roaster I have a pretty extensive familiarity with, as I've been going to their original location, their Pioneer Square location, for as long as I can remember it being opened. Now, I tried to do some background research to figure out when it first opened, and it sounds like it was around 2015, and I definitely have some older photos of me visiting that coffee shop, so I've been going for quite a few years, but it was more recently that they opened their South Lake Union location, their second location, and that was nearby where I both worked and lived, so I got an opportunity to visit that coffee shop almost daily for a couple of years, and tried every single one of their offerings in that time span as well. So it's safe to say I'm very familiar with their coffee, and I'm very much looking forward to finally getting around to discussing them. This right here is day 19 of this coffee. And I don't have a recipe for this coffee, as I did brew it through the automatic coffee maker. There is an interesting note, as I was doing a lot of the background research, they consider themselves to be on the lighter side of American coffees, and relative to a lot of the stuff in Seattle, yeah, that makes sense, but I would definitely by no means consider this to be a light American. If anything, I would say it was a light medium, and on the more developed side of that light medium for the roast profile. But with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. It's day 5, first impression, and right at the forefront I was getting a very nice caramelized sugar at the start of this cup. Quite pleasant, some very slight sugary fruits as well, and it was much more pleasant than I think I was expecting given the roast profile of this coffee. So the standard recipe I have is brewed at 205 degrees Fahrenheit, which is never necessarily ideal for a coffee like this, and I was definitely seeing a lot of smokiness in the finish. But overall, it left a quite positive first impression. I said, hey, if I can work through this coffee, then I feel like there's going to be some really nice potential in here. Day 6 lowered the temperature and ran into the Chemex and was not really enjoying the cup this much this way, as it's bringing out a lot more of the smokiness as well as the roastiness in this cup. Knew there was going to be adjustments that needed to be made. Didn't know if necessarily the V60 was ideal for this, but definitely knew that the Chemex wasn't ideal for this cup of coffee. So we went back on day 8, ran it through the automatic coffee maker, and this was by far the way I was enjoying this cup of coffee the most, as it did cut down on a lot of the smokiness and roastiness, and it was pulling out a lot more of that caramelized component that was in this cup. I want to emphasize it was a lot more of a kind of caramelized rather than a caramel, so like a caramelized chocolate. That's the note I came out with the most early in this cup of coffee, and I was quite liking it. It was really positive to this point. Day 10, best day of the coffee, and definitely found some really huge positives in this, as so much of that roastiness, smokiness was thoroughly cut down in this cup, and in its place we were seeing a really pretty caramel cup overall. Definitely a fair bit of chocolate as well, and the fruits that they have listed on here, they're slight, they're in the background, definitely nowhere near as prominent as the really notable caramelized component. Day 13. Let's see here. Coffee had lost a slight bit of that strong caramel abundance, and the most dominant component in the cup still remained that caramel, but we were starting to get some slight bit of extra things in here. And the best descriptor I had on this day was like those caramelized mixed nuts. Whenever you're going around at like a market or something and you smell those caramelized mixed nuts, that's the best way I can describe this coffee. It was quite pleasant still. I really liked the way that the sugariness of this cup was present throughout the time drinking it. Day 14, cup feels like it's definitely cooled down so much of those really noticeable and heavy caramelized components, and in its place we were getting some more complex components in this cup, including a, well, brown sugar to pie crust to even a slight bit of orange. So there's a slight bit of citrus in here as well. So these fruits that they have mentioned were starting to make a slight bit more of an appearance, but definitely not to the point where they were more abundant than the two strongest components, the caramelized component as well as that chocolate component. So with seeing, we'll say, changes in the cup, my favorite part was that caramelized component, but seeing those slight changes just made it a little bit more, we'll say, complex and well-rounded of a cup of coffee. Let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we were getting. And 3 things at a level 4, so let's go through them real quick. The body at a level 4, yeah, it's a washed Central American coffee, and it was mostly ran through the automatic coffee maker, so having a higher body is definitely to be expected. The caramel on here, level 4, Obviously, we've been touching on that the most, and it is definitely the most pronounced thing. And the chocolate is in almost similar abundance to the caramel, so I think those two are both definitely justified at the level 4. We have a lot of level 3s. Let's run through them real quick. The stone fruit, I know it's a little generous, but it's because I have the citrus fruit at level 2. And the citrus fruit is definitely there, but it's slight, and the stone fruit is in more abundance than that citrus fruit, so I had to push that one up so slightly, so it's probably generous at that level 3 mark, but it's definitely present. Now, the other things we have is the bitterness and the smokiness. Yeah, the chocolate, it can be a little dark chocolate and it can still be a little smoky. And even after it's been cut down, it's still very much present in this cup. Saltiness, yeah, mentioned that there's a fair bit of nuttiness in here. Central American, washed Central American, that should be expected. But pretty clean cup, pretty nice finish. And the sweetness, you know, if you're being really generous, you could bump it all the way up to a level 4. There is great sweetness in this, sugary sweetness. But I think, just to kind of be fair, it's probably closer to that level 3 mark, but I think that the sweetness in this cup was a really nice added feature too. How much I enjoyed this cup? Let's see here. Anything else worth discussing? I think that just about covers it. Low on the acidity, I mean, it's probably to be expected too. Alright, overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee, quite positive actually. This is better than what I remember having from a lot of previous Elm coffees in the past, and a lot of the main reason I hadn't reviewed too many Elm coffees was because, well, it goes in line with the Seattle trend. I feel like Seattle is ever so slightly behind the rest of the coffee world in terms of kind of the development of their coffees, as they still tend to be slightly more on that developed light medium side, and as a result there's no coffee roaster here that I consider going to regularly. And while I might swing by from time to time and pick up a cup of Elm, or if I can find a cup of Kuma, or stand back looking homeward, a bunch of these Seattle coffee roasters, they're not to the point where I would consider doing too many reviews on them, but this in a sense might have changed my mind ever so slightly, as I thought that this was a great alternative to a lot of the lighter stuff that we do review on this channel. Because this isn't going to be the lightest cup of coffee I've had, but if we're going to call this what it is, slightly more developed light medium, then I think this is really nice. The caramel that was coming from it, the sugary sweetness that was coming from it, was a huge selling point to me, and I enjoyed this cup of coffee, I think, a lot more than I was expecting, especially off that first impression. So I think Elm did a really nice job with this cup of coffee, and the type of person I would suggest this to is definitely someone, you know, I think maybe the best I can kind of compare this roast profile to is Cat and Cloud, which I've always said is, they spun off from a really light roasting coffee roaster and are a little bit more developed than them. But there's some really nice components that come from a lot of their coffee, and I see similarities in this cup of coffee as well. Keep in mind the strong Central American characteristics, the caramel, the chocolate, they're definitely present. And the secondary components are still nice in, you know, small doses, those fruits, and it's definitely present as well. So that type of roast profile, as well as that type of coffee, I think this is a pretty nice fit for you. But I think for the most part, I will leave this review at that. If you've by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, or anything from Elm, I'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it, or them as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And this right here has been a review of the Santos Perez Ramirez Wash Process Guatemala from Elm Coffee Roasters. Thank you for watching.